Hey, this is your orchestration tutor, Thomas Goss. Let's talk about the personal resources that you're going to require in order to be a professional orchestrator. First one is basically you're going to need a computer. All right, pen and ink is that's just not happening anymore. You're going to need a computer. You're going to need some sort of really great scoring software. I would say Sibelius is probably the one with the shortest learning curve. Of course, you're going to need a MIDI keyboard to connect to the computer so that you can work things out and just enter the data very quickly. And broadband internet access is really a must because nowadays the composer needs to have access to a lot of different things on the internet. It's just very quick to work that way. And of course, there's going to be times when you're going to need to email your scores or recordings or other kinds of things. You just do not have time to wait around if you have a slower connection. Okay, so broadband internet access is a must. All right, so that's the basics, of your workstation. You don't really need more stuff than this. Some professional orchestrators who actually do film scores with sampled sounds, they would need to have more detailed equipment, maybe some rack-mounted modules that have orchestral sounds on them and a lot of plugins installed in their computer of different orchestral programs. Okay, but you don't really need that stuff, all right? In fact, I actually hope that you will try to reach beyond that with your imagination. One of the drawbacks of having it be too easy on your ear is that your ear ends up not doing any work. It's sort of like this. If you were to take a really great piece of orchestral music, say Beethoven's Sixth Symphony, and you were to do an orchestral version of it on Sibelius, just basically type in exactly what Beethoven wrote in his score, and then listen to it on Sibelius, it would really not sound very good. The problem with that is that, if you're writing things that sound good on Sibelius, they might not actually sound good on a real orchestra. So just, watch out for that. Don't orchestrate to the sound that you hear. Okay? So that's why I'm saying it's better not to have too many bells and whistles. Another thing that you need in your personal resources is access to study scores and recordings. Okay, now YouTube is a really good source for orchestral music. Some of it sounds a little slipshod because people are just recording it with anything that they've got, sometimes even with just like a little camera that's on their cell phone. But whatever, a lot of orchestral music is available on YouTube, just listening to different orchestras playing different things. And of course, public libraries have got orchestral scores and have got recordings of classical music too. That's a really good source. If there's a particular score that you're just going to be studying for months and months, years and years, your whole life, then you should probably buy it, and probably Dover has got a copy of it. So if it's something that's important to you. Okay, now there's a new website called IMSLP. I don't know what that stands for. But check it out, IMSLP. I'll have the link in the little box over here. I think it's in that direction. It has got a lot of different scores available as PDFs. So these are things that are public domain, obviously, and you can just download a score of, say, I think everything pretty much up to Ravel and Debussy, and that's actually quite a bit of great stuff. So I actually think they've got the planets on there too, and the original version of The Rite of Spring, which is now public domain. So yeah, a lot of that great stuff is available online. So another good reason to have broadband internet access. Orchestration manuals, that's another personal resource that you should start collecting. I've got just about every orchestration manual that is available in English. And there's a couple that aren't so good, but the main one that I use nowadays is this, okay? Sam Adler's Study of Orchestration. And the reason why I like this is because everything is basically up to date, okay? All the different trills that that instruments can do, the ranges of instruments now, just, you know, that's pretty much set in stone now, but it wasn't for some of the earlier orchestration manuals. You know, if you go buy an orchestration manual that was written almost 100 years ago, then you might be cheating yourself of all of this great stuff that is possible now. Okay, so I would say get the most up-to-date manual. Sam Adler's is the one that is the most up-to-date, as far as I know. Some practical skill as a musician, that's an important personal resource, mainly in your ability to express your idea to somebody else. I've actually gotten commissions by being able to sit down at my piano and basically play what my idea was. And then the person whose job it was to pay me the money or to approve the project basically said, hey, that sounds great, let's use that. Okay, so I've also done like orchestral mock-ups, sort of similar to what I was discussing before. You know, you get the program to do an orchestral version of your idea, and then you make a recording of that and you show it to a choreographer or to a film director, and then they make the decision and then you get work. So yeah, so that's an important part of getting work. Now, you don't have to be a great performer. Let's look at one of the greatest. People say the first modern orchestrator was Berlioz. Okay, the only instrument that he was technically proficient on was classical guitar. So you don't have to be a fantastic performer, but you do need to be musical. You know what I mean? I mean, I just sit down and I play piano for fun, and it sort of gives me back something that I feel like I'm always giving away. So yeah, so try to be a musician, not just a composer. Now, the last personal resource I would say is that you have to have a well-developed musical brain. Part of that is actually spent in just daydreaming. Okay, if you don't daydream, if you don't fantasize, if you don't imagine things, if you don't spend time just letting your brain do whatever it wants to, then where are you going to get any ideas from? So you do have to have time to daydream. Arthur Honegger, the great Swiss-French composer who was a member of Les Six, wrote in his little book called I Am a Composer that to the outside observer, when he was working on a piece, to all intents and purposes, it looked like he was a man on a holiday. You know, he might spend a lot of time just sort of staring off into space, or maybe picking up a book and looking at it and putting it back down again. And I find that is true for me too, is that I spend a lot of time thinking about things. And then when I'm ready to put it down on paper, I feel like the idea is a lot more effective. So that might be sort of enabling all of you procrastinators out there, and if so, I apologize, but the truth is you really do need time to think about your ideas. So daydreaming is just like the fundamental part of having a musical brain. Daydreaming leads to imagination, and imagination is sort of your own internal orchestra. You're able to hear the ideas before you put them down on paper. That's so important. And that's one of the things that makes score reading so important, is if you just learn to see it. You know, if you see the piece of paper with the music on it and you hear it in your head, your orchestra inside your head is playing it, which can be eventually a much more perfect orchestra than anything you could possibly hear in the outside external world. Okay, so these are very, very important things. The ability to daydream and just let your imagination run wild. Very, very important personal resource.